Hey, principals, are you dealing with discipline and behavior issues? What tools are you using? The old ones or the new ones? Let's talk about it. So let me give you an analogy. I want you to think of a hammer and a nail. They work well together. But when I think about the hammer and the nail, I think about our old times, right? Remember when we were in school, the hammer represented that parental figure, that teacher, that coach, that principal, grandma. Oh, if you ever had grandma come up to your school, you knew you were in trouble, right? So I want you to imagine you were a nail as a student and you had a hammer in your life that would hold you accountable and also make you think about your choices. And when I think about the hammer and the nail, the hammers used to, one, they used to show up to school. Do you remember when those parental figures used to show up to school on a consistent basis? And when they showed up, they always supported the adults. They listened to everything that you said. Even if you manipulated that story or lied a little bit about that kid's behavior, the adults, the hammers, they still drank that Kool-Aid 100%, right? And guess what? They would take that nail home and they would hammer that nail, whatever that looks like for you at home, but you remember those experiences, right? So let's fast forward. I still want to consider the parents as hammers, but I think they're a different type of hammer. I mean, let's just face it. Most of the times, if it's an older kid, they have technology in their hand. They've already messaged their parent their version of what happened, of why they're in the office, right, principals? You know what's happening. And then that parental figure shows up, the hammer, and notice the first shift is they don't even want to talk to you. The first thing they want to do is talk to their child, the nail, right? And then they believe everything that their child texted them or messaged them or told them. So I noticed that shift there. Eventually, they're going to have to talk with you. And don't you, as a principal or an administrator, you start to share with them it's a poor choice or a poor voice. They violated student code of conduct and you need to apply a consequence. And as you're talking through this, you're starting to notice these new types of hammers. They don't accept that accountability. And in fact, they probably, even if you told them you have 82 witnesses and 17 videos of their child doing this act, they would still be like, it wasn't me. I think at this point, this is the part that becomes frustrating as us as adults because you can feel that shift. And then you tell them, well, whether you believe me or not, you're going to have to send their child home or give them an exclusionary consequence, which I'm fine with. But before they leave, they're going to show these new nails what it's going to look like. They're going to go off on you in the office. They're going to go to central office. They're going to get on social media and Facebook and bash you. And unfortunately, that's what they're teaching this youth of how they're going to handle these discipline issues when they disagree with us. But then eventually they're going to take them home. And when they take them home, they're going to be like, wow, you're suspended for 3 days. We better get you a new video game or something to do, or you're just going to run the streets unsupervised. This is crazy the way these hammers and nails are working out today. So let's examine that tool, right? The hammer versus the nail. The hard part for us is we're still threatening and using the hammer philosophy, but ultimately a lot of our nails are now screws. I mean, think about it. You're like, do I need to call your mom? They're like, I already called my mom. They're like, what? They're like, do I need to send you home? They're like, go ahead and send me home. So what you're starting to recognize, and I'm sure you're seeing the same thing, is you're threatening with the same old hammer methodology, but it's no longer effective. That hammer and that nail and that relationship are no longer symbiotic. And in fact, when you think about it, think about two bolts, titanium bolts. We have screws, we have bolts, we have different fasteners. We're no longer nails. Think about the trauma that is infiltrated our schools. These titanium bolts, you could bring the biggest, baddest hammer and it's not going to change their behavior nor change the trajectory of their life. So as I'm starting to think about this philosophy different, I started to recognize that when it comes to helping students academically, we may have 87 different resources to help them as a struggling reader, but we're really dependent on one tool, the hammer of in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, or detention, or our approach of a threat to hold over these nails and they're non-nails. This is the part where I started to think about the quote from Maslow's. He says, if you only have a hammer, you tend to look at everything as a nail. And that was my approach when I was working as an administrator at Ed White Middle School. I came in and I just said, I'll be the biggest, baddest hammer. I'm going to change the trajectory of these kids. I'm going to send a strong message to them. But ultimately, I failed. So what do we do now? Well, our approach to differentiated discipline is we got to get a bigger toolbox, not a bigger hammer. That's not the answer. And I thought it was, but I've learned through experiences it's not. So through differentiated discipline, we can take you through disrupting the discipline cycle. We can teach you that, guess what? Sometimes you need a screw for a screw. Sometimes you need a ratchet for a bolt. Sometimes you need a hammer for a nail. It's about identifying every student and where they come from through those disciplinary issues. So I'm going to invite you to come to our website at ddiscipline.com to learn more.